We've all heard the story. Jews were expelled from Judea by the Romans, scattered across the globe, and after 2,000 years of wandering, have now returned to reclaim their birthright. It's a powerful narrative, foundational to modern Zionism. But is it historically accurate? Let's examine the evidence. Was the Jewish diaspora truly created by a Roman expulsion? And what are the probabilities that diaspora Jews are direct descendants of those expelled? Let's look at the history. Like the Phoenicians and Greeks, Jews spread across the Mediterranean in search of trade and opportunity. Scholarly opinion diverges on the size of the diaspora at the time of the Roman conquest. Some put 80% in the diaspora and 20% in Judea and Galilee. Others argue it was closer to a 50-50 split. Either way, at least half of the world's Jews were in the diaspora at the time of the Roman conquest. This was not a diaspora of refugees, but one of immigrants seeking opportunity. The Roman-Jewish wars were catastrophic, but the devastation was localized. The Jewish population in the northern region of Galilee was largely left in place. Most of the victims of Rome's reprisals were either killed outright or sold into slavery. The enslaved were scattered across the empire, and most would eventually be assimilated into local populations. The Talmud, written centuries later, makes clear there was a religious obligation to ransom enslaved Jews, and this may have taken place in cities like Rome, where communities were strong enough. But I have found no records of it actually happening, and nothing to suggest large numbers of slaves were freed. Against a diaspora of millions, it was almost certainly just a drop in the bucket. Ancient sources Josephus and Cassius Dio give figures of 1.1 million dead and 97,000 enslaved after Jerusalem's fall, and 580,000 killed in the Bar Kokhba revolt. Modern historians think these figures are inflated, but nonetheless it is certain that the carnage was horrific. Josephus observes that some escaped to nearby regions, yet gives no totals, and other Roman historians describe the devastation without noting any refugees. The record is clear on killings and enslavement, but silent on deportation. Those who fled did so on their own, and their numbers were evidently too small to warrant more than passing notice. At this stage of the empire, Rome's approach, unlike the Neo-Babylonians' policy of deportation and resettlement, was to destroy rebellious cities and sell survivors into slavery. No organized mass exodus would have survived the Roman legions. They would have been slaughtered or enslaved. Judging from the historical record, the actual refugee influx from the Roman wars would have added between 1% and 5% to the diaspora, depending on whether the diaspora was 80% or 50% of the Jewish population. In other words, the odds that any 20th century diaspora Jew had an ancestor who was a Roman exile are slim to negligible. So, where did the story of Rome creating the diaspora come from? It was invented in the Middle Ages in reaction to the total destruction of one of the largest and most influential Jewish communities in history. 6 months after the Christian conquest of Muslim Spain in 1492, 50% of Spanish Jews were forcibly converted, and the other 50% were expelled. That's not counting the thousands who were killed. Faced with Christian claims that exile was divine punishment, Jewish scholars retrofitted Roman violence into a story of expulsion that countered the Christian narrative. By reframing the Roman reprisals as a forced exile, they established a heroic foundation for the diaspora. It was a coherent, unifying story that gave meaning to the suffering of a community scattered across the globe and traumatized by the events in Spain. The popular narrative of a singular, cataclysmic Roman expulsion that created the Jewish diaspora is a powerful myth, but it never happened. The reality is that the Jewish diaspora was a dynamic, global phenomenon that existed for centuries before the Roman-Jewish wars. The story of the ancient Jewish people is therefore one not of expulsion, but of the audacity to go wherever opportunity led them, while still preserving their religion and culture. It's an inspiring story, just not the story the Zionists needed. The Zionists wanted to make it appear that a millennia-old wrong of involuntary expulsion was being righted. But the reality is, like every other immigrant group in the world, the ancestors of the Zionists left looking for a better life. What about the Jews who stayed? Most of them converted to Christianity and then to Islam, and are still living where they have lived for thousands of years. In the ultimate irony, they are being expelled from their homes by the descendants of emigrants who abandoned Judea for greener pastures before the Romans ever set foot in the Levant. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons if you would like to see more content like this.